This morning we've asked local blacksmith Corey Hendricks to come and demonstrate for us to help you imagine what blacksmithing would have been like about 100 years ago in the Nacoochee Valley. He's going to demonstrate some techniques, talk about his tools, and give us an idea of how a farm blacksmith would have worked 100 years ago. We also hope that you'll visit the blacksmith shop behind the Nacoochee Valley cabin, built here on site and used to demonstrate farm blacksmithing on a monthly basis.
I'm Corey Hendricks, and we're here today at the Sautee Nacoochee Heritage Site to talk about blacksmithing. What I'm doing right now is just heating up my piece of iron. The forge works by blasting air through a coal fire, and that gets me to the temperatures I need to work it. The hotter the metal gets, the easier it is to work. It starts turning red around 1500 degrees. I like to work between 16 and 1700 degrees. By 2000 degrees, the metal will actually burn. Historically, blacksmiths did this totally by the color of the metal. So they would learn to work at red or orange or yellow heats, depending on what they wanted to do. Everything was by sight. The hammer and the anvil are used to shape the metal, and it moves much like clay when you get it to the right temperature. The act of forging, hammering the metal, actually changes the molecular structure of the steel and makes it stronger. Now, smiths didn't know about molecular structures, but they learned that by hitting it, they made it stronger. They could forge in strength. This is just a basic blacksmithing technique known as drawing out. I'm just taking the metal and making it longer. Blacksmithing is the repeated application of fire and hammer. Now I'm going to round it up. The blacksmith was often known as the king of trades because everybody had to come to the blacksmith for their tools. A potter needed metal tools, carpenter needed metal tools, almost every other trade needed metal tools, but the blacksmith was the only one who could make his own tools. But if you look in a good old blacksmith shop, they'll have hundreds of different types of tongs and all kinds of tools that most blacksmiths don't even recognize, and that's because a blacksmith could make his own tools. There'd be some project he was working on, some commission he had to do, and he made a tool for that one job, that one day, because he was frustrated and hung it on the wall and never looked at it again. Blacksmiths, especially mountain blacksmiths, would use whatever they had. They rarely got new stock, so they mostly had to recycle old things. They never threw anything away if they could help it. I've heard of blacksmiths taking nails and welding them together with a hammer into long rods, and then welding all those rods together into a shotgun barrel. Now that's recycling. Most any iron implement, especially in mountain areas like this, would have been made by a blacksmith, and it would have been made to order. They didn't really have an inventory of things or a shop to go look at. This is just a simple wall hook for the house. Very utilitarian item. They made 1,000 different kinds of hooks for 1,000 different purposes. I've seen so many different kinds, and this is just a very simple hook for the wall. In a cabin like this, you couldn't always build shelves, and you needed to get things out of your way because you didn't have enough room. And then by quenching the steel, I've cooled it down. So I went from around 1700 degrees to cool enough to touch in just an instant. Blacksmiths, even though they were a service industry, I've noticed as I looked at the things that blacksmiths of old made, they always managed to put a little touch of artwork in it. And one way they did that was by making leaves. To take something as cold and unfeeling as steel and give it life. Blacksmithing was around for 4,000 years as best we can figure. And into the mountain communities, it went up to the mid-1900s before it died out. And the main reason it died out was industry. It became easier and easier to make things cheaper, and so rather than repair things, you just bought it new. One of the last big days for blacksmithing was during the New Deal, the construction projects by Roosevelt. And he actually hired a bunch of people who still knew how to blacksmith to teach other people how to do blacksmithing. So a lot of the New Deal construction projects have a lot of blacksmithing. And a lot of the guys who learned it there taught the guys who I learned from. Blacksmithing, by and large, has been an oral tradition for that 4,000-year history. They didn't want to write things down even when they did have writing, because then someone could steal their secrets. Blacksmiths like their secrets. To make a leaf, first you got to isolate a mass at the end of the rod and then thin out behind it so you have a nice stem. Isolated the mass, now I just flatten that out and give it some life. Blacksmiths were tradesmen, but they were also artists. If you could get a son apprenticed to a blacksmith, you had sent that son to college. He would learn a trade that would carry him through his entire life. With every heat, it's starting to look more and more leaf-like. Now with the last heat, I'm just going to give it some curves and life.
better, and maybe spin it.